Good morning. Director Jeanette Mason and director Phil Murphy soon discovered their enormous turnout had more talent and more worthy principal roles within their two productions, anchored by two completely different casts of principal actors. Many of the major and minor supporting roles were cast to perform in both productions, providing a galvanizing stability. Each production was given a surname to clarify their own identity.
Creation of the original goes back to the early 80s in France, looking for a project and developed this idea built around Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. And it was highly successful in its early incarnations in France. And Cameron Mackintosh became interested and contracted with them to pursue it on a much larger scale. Brought in someone who translated the lyrics at the time into English, and planned for a West End production. They opened it in the West End, I want to say, in around 1984, 1985. Very successful, and got a lot of interest across the pond in America. And of course, Cameron Mackintosh, I think, always intended to bring it to Broadway. Indeed did, and it was a smash success here. Although that was slow building. It was not overnight, but it was recognized as a kind of a new statement in the world of musical theater, spectacle, and not and more serious content, and so it ended up performing in three places: Paris, London, and Broadway, all at the same time. Eventually, productions all over the world. I think next they went to Toronto, and then there was Japan, and to the point where it's become one of the most produced shows in history.
Briefly, what's the synopsis of the play?
Well, I don't know how you synopsize Victor Hugo's rather large manifesto, but it's the plot line follows the story of Jean Valjean, who has been imprisoned for 20 years from his very early life for stealing a loaf of bread, and nothing more than that. And so, in a sense, was wrongfully imprisoned, or not judiciously, shall we say. And he has a counterpart in Inspector Javert, who becomes kind of the bane of his existence. And Javert and Valjean are, in my opinion, kind of Janus type. They're two sides of the same coin. They're cut from the same kind of cloth. And so Valjean is released, but cannot proceed very effectively. So he resorts to some of his old ways, steals some silver from the bishopric. And when he does that, he's captured, and it's the bishop who sets him free by saying he allowed him to take those things. And it's at that point that Valjean realizes he has to change his life. And so he spends the rest of his life in a more redemptive fashion. He helps a woman, Fantine, who's dying of tuberculosis, and has some connection to the fact that she's even in this situation. And once he realizes that, decides to help her. When she dies, he takes the fostership of her daughter and raises the daughter as his own. Ultimately, we move forward in the play, in the musical, to 1832 and the student uprising following Napoleon's rise. in France, and at that time, young Cosette, falls in love with a student, Marius, who's part of the student uprising, and he endeavors to ensure the safety of the young man. Again, all in a redemptive fashion, leading up to his final days. Cosette marries Marius, and finally Jean Valjean is able to find his rest eternally, and that's the kind of arc of the play, if you will.
That is an incredible synopsis.
Oh, well.
You did. Okay, you have this production, double cast.
Right. Well, there are a couple of things about it. Number one, we've wanted to do it here for 25 years, like most theaters in the country, and have not been able to until recently. Some years ago, about a little over a decade ago, Cameron McIntosh released it to high schools and colleges, especially high schools. And high schools did it. And at one point I thought, why would he do that? It seemed like a silly thing when everybody else wanted to be doing it and he wasn't letting us. Then it dawned on me that maybe he's building an audience for the future. Maybe it was a very smart move. Well, this last year, the rights were finally released for a limited time, actually, to community and regional theaters, because it's coming back to Broadway once again in 2014. So we had a 2-year gap in which we could license the show. We did, and expecting that it would be well received, which indeed it was, we had 170 people audition. Most in our history. I think prior to that we came in around 120, 125. Most recently for Beauty and the Beast, big Disney, obviously, lots of kids. This brought in lots of adults. We ended up having the great opportunity to double cast if we chose to. And being a community theater, one of the most important things is to be able to bring in new people. It's a tough thing sometimes to do because you also want to build the best show that you can, and you don't always have the luxury of making it available, making shows available to everyone. I'd say once in a generation you get a show where people come out in large numbers, and this is that show. And with that comes the potential to change the face of the theater for the next decade. So it made good sense if we had the abilities inherent in this group to double cast our main roles, which we were able to do, which was very exciting. Hence, we double cast. We have a lot of new faces. We have old faces, or older faces, veteran faces, shall we say. And then we have some hyper veterans involved in it. The director, Jeanette Mason, myself, we go back.
What's your title?
With the show?
Yes.
Associate director. Kind of making sure that I've got Jeanette's back, if she needs me. And I also spent a lot of time working on some of the production elements and making sure that they were solidified and completed.
When's opening night?
Opening night is October 4th, tomorrow. By the time this may be seen, it's probably already opened, but officially.
How long is the production going to run for?
It's going to run through the entire month of October through November 2nd. 5 weeks, longest run we've ever had. With the double casting, they alternate nights. Each one gets, I think, 10 or 11 performances, something like that. And it's a very satisfying show right now. Some wonderful talent on stage. A group of mixed cast people, because we weren't able to have one or the other cast, so we mixed them, sang for Rotary, Traverse City's Rotary Club, on Tuesday this last week, and it was just a treat for everybody, including, I think, the cast, because it was their first time in front of an audience, and Rotary just loved them. They went nuts, got a standing ovation, so.
Phil, I can't wait until opening night. Thank you very much for this interview.
Sure.
and I hope that you get full houses.
So do I.